The topic I've prepared, I hope it's going to be of interest to you, but it's also about preserving our tradition, our sampradaya as well. So you can all just join your hands and you can repeat after me. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Om Ajnanatimirandasya
Om Ajnanatimidasya
Jnananjana Shalakaya
Jnananjana Shalakaya
Chakshurunmilitam Yena
Chakshurunmilitam Yena
Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha.
Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha.
Namo Vishnu Padaya
Namo Vishnupadaya
Krishna Prestaya Bhutale
Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale
Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami
Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami
Iti Namine
Niti Namine
Namaste Saraswati Deve
Namaste Saraswati Deve
Gauravani Pracharine
Gauravani Pracharine
Nirvishesha Shunyavadi
Nirvishesha Shunyavadi
Paschat Deshatarine
Paschatatarine
Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya
Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya
Prabhu Nityananda
Prabhu Nityananda
Shri Advaita Gadadhara
Shri Advaita Gadadhara
Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda
Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, so we will be reading from Bhagavad Gita as it is. The first mantra means that I offer my respectful obeisances unto the source of all consciousness, which is Vasudeva. Secondly, we also have the second mantra, which is I offer my respectful obeisances unto my spiritual master who opened my eyes with the torch of knowledge, and I offer my obeisances unto him. I also offer my obeisances unto His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, who has very dear to Krishna, having taken shelter at His lotus feet. Our obeisances unto you, O Master, servant of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami. You're kindly spreading the message of Lord Chaitanya in the Western countries, which is full of voyeurism and impersonalism. I also offer my obeisances to Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Prabhu Nityananda, Sri Advaita Gadadhara, Sri Vas, and all others in the line of devotion. And we have the Mahamantra, which offers the obeisances and chants the names of Srimati Radharani and Hare. And then we have Krishna, meaning all attractive, and Rama, meaning the source of all pleasure. So we'll read from Bhagavad Gita as it is. We will be reading from chapter 4, which is titled Transcendental Knowledge. So chapter 4, text number 2. Yeah, so Shloka 2, chapter 4, and the chapter titled Transcendental Knowledge. If you have Bhagavad Gita, it's as it is, the yellow version, hardbound 183, page 183. And then you can also repeat after me for the shloka as well. So chapter 4, text 2, page 183. Evam parampara praptam imam raja sayo vidu sakale niham mahatma yogo nasha parantapa. And you could repeat after me for the word translations. Evam, thus. Parampara, by disciplined succession. Praptam, received. Imam,
Imam,
this science,
this science,
Raja Rashaya,
Rajashaya,
the saintly kings,
Vidu,
Vidu, understood,
understood,
Sa,
Sa,
that knowledge,
that knowledge,
Kalina,
Kalena,
in the course of time,
in the course of time,
Iha,
Iha,
in this world,
in this world,
Mahata,
Mahata,
great,
great,
Yoga,
Yoga,
the science of one's relationship with the Supreme,
science of one's relationship with the Supreme,
Nashta,
Nashta,
scattered,
scattered,
Parantapa,
Paramapa,
O Arjuna, the subduer of the enemies.
O Arjuna, subduer of the enemy.
Okay, thank you for repeating after me. So I'll go ahead and read the translation and then the purport as well. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. The supreme science was thus received through the chain of disciplic succession, and the saintly kings understood it in that way. But in course of time, the succession was broken, and therefore the science as it appears to be lost. Purport. It is clearly stated that the Gita was especially meant for the saintly kings because they were to execute its purpose in ruling over the citizens. Certainly, Bhagavad Gita was never meant for the demonic persons who would dissipate its value for no one's benefit and would devise all types of interpretations according to personal whims. As soon as the original purpose was scattered by the motives of the unscrupulous commentators, there arose the need to re-establish the disciplic succession. 5,000 years ago, it was detected by the Lord himself that the disciplic succession was broken, and therefore he declared that the purpose of the Gita appeared to be lost. In the same way, at the present moment, also there are so many editions of the Gita, especially in English. But almost all of them are not according to authorized disciplic succession. There are innumerable interpretations rendered by different mundane scholars, but almost all of them do not accept the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, although they make a good business on the words of Sri Krishna. This spirit is demonic because demons do not believe in God, but simply enjoy the property of the Supreme. Since there is a great need of an edition of the Gita in English, as it is received by the Parampara, disciplic succession system, an attempt made herewith to fulfill this great want. Bhagavad Gita, accepted as it is a great boon to humanity. But if it is accepted as a treatise of philosophical speculations, it is simply a waste of time. So here let's go back to the verse translation. So we see here that the supreme science was received through the chain of disciplic succession. So this is very important because Krishna consciousness is very much a spiritual science. It's not just a tenets of laws that we follow that are pious or religious, but it's a way of understanding the spirit and the supreme, and we take to various processes of Krishna consciousness, such as living a life in the mode of goodness, practicing meditation, offering our food to Krishna. And in this way, we slowly realize more and more about the absolute truth by rendering service and engaging in the mode of goodness. And that's what is mentioned in the translation. You can see it's a supreme science. So it's not just, sometimes people may dismiss it as, okay, well, this is something that you're doing, it may not be the best use of your time, or it may be a bunch of practices that's not really understood. But behind each practice, behind each practical manifestation of the philosophy, there is a logical reasoning behind it. So Srila Prabhupada, whatever he gave us, there was always a practical reason behind what he did. So that's really important to first recognize that what Srila Prabhupada gave us was very practical. So the way I look at Srila Prabhupada's mood and giving us the linking us to the sampradaya or the tradition is, on one sense, it's very sticking to principles. On another sense, Srila Prabhupada is very practical. So we see in the translation that the supreme science was thus received through the chain of disciplic succession. So the chain of disciplic succession, if we go to, I believe it is the beginning, the introduction. So I'll show you the page. So chapter 1. So at the end of the introduction, you'll see the disciplic succession right there. So you have, that's page 30, where it talks about, it refers to this verse, Evam parampara praptam imam rajasayo vidu. The Bhagavad Gita as it is received through his disciplic succession. So we have Krishna, Brahma, Narada, Vyasa, Madhva, Padmanabha, Narahari, Madhva, Akshobhaya, Jayatirtha, Jnana Sindhu, Dayanidhi, Vidyanidhi, Rajendra, Jayadharma, Purushottama, Brahmanya Tirtha, Vyasa Tirtha, Lakshmipati, Madhavendra Puri, Ishvara Puri, Nityananda Advaita, Lord Chaitanya, Rupa, Swarupa Sanatana, Raghunatha, Jiva, Krishnadasa, Narottama, Vishwanatha, Paladeva Vidyabhushan, Jagannatha, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Gaur Kishore Das Babaji, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and our founder Acharya, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. So these are, if you see this list, these are all the prominent names in our disciplic succession. So this Bhagavad Gita as it is that you're holding and you're listening from and hearing from, this is coming in that disciplic succession. So a lot of the purports that you see are based on the commentaries of not only Srila Prabhupada but also the previous acharyas. So it's actually very rare for us to come in contact with a sampradaya in a Western country. If you think about it, there may be many centers of various different spiritual paths around the world, but that which is offering a spiritual path and a connection to a bona fide disciplic succession, that is very rare. And we see that, we can think of it as like embassies of the spiritual world. Just like you may go to Ottawa or Washington DC, there may be different consulates for different countries and different organizations may be there based on that. Similarly, ISCKON, when Srila Prabhupada came, one of his gifts to us is also to realize that we are offering an ISCKON, which is his tutelage, where we have practices on Krishna consciousness as well as connection to the sampradaya or tradition. And this is something that's very, very rare, because we may have deities in so many other centers. We may have some sort of prayers that are happening, sermon that's been given, but what is actually authorized? And what actually comes in disciplic section? Like, is the speaker speaking? Do they have a guru? And if the head of the organization, do they have a spiritual teacher? Do they come in a spiritual lineage? So that is something we don't really see very often. But, at ISCKON, Srila Prabhupada set it up as more of an educational center for the spiritual science. He didn't merely wanted it to be just a matter of people coming together and having a good time, but actually getting deeper and deeper in Krishna Bhakti specifically. So we see that from this verse. And another thing is, the sampradaya can be broken, which is also, Krishna mentions that the sampradaya was broken and that's why Krishna had to come. So that means that the sampradaya, this chain, has to be protected, right? And who protects the sampradaya? This is my question to anybody can answer.
Each person who belongs to that sampradaya, they have to follow in the path of the acharyas. So that way we protect and we give the torch to the next person. It's like a relay running.
Yes.
So we carefully present it, the way we act and do things. So that's how we can preserve it.
Yes. So that's the answer right there. It's all of our responsibility. We have Srila Prabhupada, the Acharya. We may have various Shiksha Gurus and Diksha Gurus in ISKCON. But it's up to us to really preserve that tradition and pass the baton on to the next generation. And we ourselves, in order to preserve the Sampradaya, we ourselves must know the teachings and we ourselves must practice the teachings. And the example it is given, for example, by vocation I'm an engineer, so if I take engineering, there are certain schools that offer it, University of Toronto, UBC, McGill, like that. If I were to go to university and take, okay, I'll take a course in chemistry, then I'll take a course in arts, then I'll take a course in medicine, then I'll take a course in mathematics. In this way, you don't go anywhere because you're just taking a bunch of random courses and you're undecided. But when we have a major like, medicine, nursing, engineering, there's a specific course that you have to go, specific set of courses, specific set of lab exposure. So similarly, in our sampradaya, we follow certain teachings, we follow certain practices, we follow certain standards, and we stick according to that because it helps us get towards the ultimate goal, which is ultimately Krishna Prema, pure love of Krishna. So that's the goal, and those are the practices that we follow. So certain standards that Srila Prabhupada mentioned that we should follow, we follow, and he made things very simple. He simplified a lot of things for us because he understood that being in a Western country, it's hard to practice anything that's very austere or requires a lot of penances. So he made things simplified for us. And I think when we are able to follow that simplicity and share it with others, we make the Sankirtan movement more accessible. So Sankirtan, what's the meaning of Sankirtan? Can anybody say? Sankirtan, what's the meaning?
Group of people, group of devotees coming together
Yeah.
to glorify the holy name.
Holy name. Yeah, so group of devotees coming together and glorifying the holy name. So that is known as Sankirtan. So Sankirtan also means being inclusive. So we should be inclusive also, which means if you're doing kirtan, for example, make sure the tune of the kirtan is it's easily followable, right? And it's simple. It's not too quiet, but also not too loud, right? It has to be a good, making sure the emphasis of the sacred sound, the Mahamantra is there. So that is very important. And part of that is, there's various different standards Srila Prabhupada gave, and I can show you some examples. So I just have some props. So this is a scent that we offer to the Lord. So this scent is about half or quarter full. So if you can imagine this scent to be that which is part of our tradition. Now if I were to put some water in this vial, would that reduce the potency of the scent?
Yes.
Right? It would. But we may look at this and think that, okay, well, we have this scent that's offered to Lord Narasimhadev, and we may think of it as incomplete. And we may think, okay, well, let's add this, let's add that, let's add some water. So whenever we take some teachings or practices and we think, okay, well, you guys only chant Hare Krishna, why don't you chant this mantra and that mantra? Your practices are so simple, why don't you increase complexity? Sometimes if it's not according to Sampradaya, then it's watering down the Sampradaya. So we must be very careful that keep it simple, but stick to our principles. So that's one example of that. And this container is protecting the scent from going anywhere. So we should be like a container protecting the Sampradaya and passing it on from generation to generation. So we must know what the standard is, and then we must be able to pass it down in a way that's applicable, that's practical, and that's relatable for people. Another example is, you might have heard Krishna mention patram pushpam phalam toyam yome bhaktya prayajati tadaham bhakti uparitam ashnami prayatatmana, which means you offer me with love and devotion a leaf, flower, fruit, or water. In this way you can you should show your devotion to me. So I have an example. So this is known as patram, right? Have you seen this, spruce needles? So when I was in Sharanagati, you could offer, I asked one of the Prabhupada disciples, what do you do for winter? You don't get flowers there, there's obviously no flower shop you can go buy flowers from. They said you could take one of these spruce, cut it, and then you bend it. And when you bend this, it has a nice fragrance that comes up. And he says that this is known as the patram, the leaf of the spruce tree that grows locally. And you could cut this and offer it to the Lord. So they offer it to the Gaur Nitai deities or deities at home, they take this and they offer it. And that's one way of showing that example of practicality in Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada didn't impose that we impose something that's very difficult, we can do something that's practical. Whatever is locally available, you can cook it and offer it to the deities, as long as it's against, with our Vaishnava principles. And it's the fall season, so we have wonderful maple leaves, and that's something that we can also consider as an offering to the Lord. Any local berries that grow, the fruits that are available. So I think it's really good that we use local things in Krishna's service. Srila Prabhupada, if you remember, some of you may know that Srila Prabhupada distributed cookies to kids. Now, cookies is not available in traditional mandirs in India. You probably won't see this in Tirupati, or you'll see laddus and all that, because that's what's local and popular. But Srila Prabhupada adjusted. He adjusted according to the local time, place, and circumstance. He also gave second initiation to women and allowed women to stay in the ashram, which wasn't done traditionally in India, but he saw, okay, things are done a certain way in the West. So he was able to adjust and adapt so that we make it more and more inclusive. So those are some ways where Srila Prabhupada stuck to the principle of, okay, it has to be our Vaishnava mode of goodness food, but you can offer, say, cookies or pasta or anything that may seem Western, and it's still according to our rules and regulations, but it also includes the practicality. So I attended a seminar recently, and the Bhagavad Gita as it is, as mentioned in the purport itself, this Gita, we have a campaign going on for the Bhagavad Gita Marathon. So if you have friends or you have people who have been through a hard time during the pandemic, you can definitely consider this to be a gift that you can offer to them. And if you don't have a copy of the Bhagavad Gita at home, when it's cold and snowy outside, you can warm up with the Bhagavad Gita inside. And it's definitely a book that really will be there to enliven and enlighten. Also given in a very simple and plain to understand English. So we have our book table in the back, so you can definitely see me after the program. I'll be happy to recommend a certain set of books that would be most appropriate. And giving this knowledge is the best remedy in this day and age where there's so much ignorance that's out there in society, but through enlightenment we can help uplift one another and enliven one another. So I attended a seminar recently talking about Srila Prabhupada on Kirtan standards. So I want to share a little bit about that. So has anybody attended Kirtan standards seminar before? Anybody? Okay. So this was given by His Holiness Bhakti Marg Swami, who took this Kirtan standards from Srila Prabhupada, and His Holiness Jayadvaita Swami also mentioned about Kirtan standards. So there's a lot of things about Srila Prabhupada that we can preserve in the Sampradaya. One is the teaching. So if we take the teachings and we're able to explain it to others in maybe more modern language, that's acceptable. But if we change the teachings, then we kind of break the Sampradaya. It's really important that we preserve that. Prashadam standards is another thing where it's wonderfully maintained here. And then there's also Kirtan standards. So Kirtan standards, I want to share a little bit about what Srila Prabhupada mentioned. So Srila Prabhupada mentioned that Sankirtan must be obviously have inclusiveness, and we offer obeisances to the Panchatattva. So we have the Panchatattva mantra, and then the Hare Krishna Maha mantra. And most of our kirtan should be predominantly the Hare Krishna mantra. When Srila Prabhupada was chanting in Thompson Square Park in New York, he went non-stop for 3 hours with one tune. So, and he just had a little drum and some kartal, and he would go with that. So mostly kartal, mridanga, for example, when we had the Guru Puja, we translated the English translation. So that shows some relatability to us. So in the seminar, what was mentioned was, it's good to stick to 1 or 2 tunes and not having to switch around every 2-3 minutes. in terms of the mood, it's to serve the Supreme. So when we chant the Mahamantra, it is the sacred sound that is Krishna. And we serve the Mahamantra by making sure that the mantra is the loudest, the voices of people are the loudest, and then subservient to that is the kartal and mridanga. Not that the kartal and mridanga are so loud that you can barely hear the mantra. So that needs to be in place, and also follow the leader. So the leader is whoever has the mic. So if the leader is playing mridanga, then they play accordingly. But if the leader is playing with kartal, then the mridanga player or the kartal player, there's another one, should follow accordingly, and not dictating how fast they go. And typically it's a steady rhythm where you have a slow kirtan and you build up to a steady or medium slow rhythm. So the leader must set a pace and tune that's more inclusive and easy to chant. In terms of the mridanga and kartal playing, it was mentioned that it should be sweet and melodious that we play. Sometimes that, it's a certain skill that we require, and sometimes we see in centers where, you have a center and you have maybe 10, 15 kartal players. And some people don't know how to play kartal, so they'll just keep on, take this and go, so that is not what, serving in the movement and the Sankirtan, you have to make it attractive for everybody. So play the mridanga sweetly and the kartal sweetly, and not that it's so loud that, you can't even hear yourself. So that is very important. So it's a, madhurya mridanga bhaji, right? So that principle is very important. So soft kartal playing, instrument should be subordinate to the singer, and the sound system should be clear, sweet, and attractive, and it shouldn't be loud or distorted or painful. And the Mahamantra should be the primary mantra in all ISCON kirtans. And this was something interesting. The kartal should be like the gopis' bells. So the ankle bells. So as the gopis are walking, they have those anklets. So the kartal should sound like that, which I've never heard of. So they shouldn't be clanked like the example I just did. That's not very attractive. So you should know your capacity. So if you know how to play kartal, then play it well. Otherwise, if you don't know how to play it, don't try and bang on it. Just give it to somebody else who can play. So Srila Prabhupada had that type of standard, and also have the Mahamantra as the predominating mantra. Not we sometimes, if a newcomer comes and they hear, Jai Krishna Balaram, Jai Krishna Balaram, they won't know who Krishna Balaram is, or Jai, Jai Radha Manohara, Radha Manohara. So we're going to chant the deities of all around the world, and we have our deities here, we should chant theirs as Jai, and that's it, keep it simple. But sometimes we just, want to go and Jai, Jaya, Jaya, and then the Mahamantra kind of gets eaten up. So we should try and keep the Mahamantra there. And also some mantras, they may be, we don't necessarily chant because they don't come in Sampradaya. So some of the mantras that were mentioned was the Radhe Radhe Govinda Govinda Radhe. So this doesn't come in our Sampradaya, so you don't see us, we should not be chanting if we see that. Another one is Raghupati Raghava Raja Ram Patita Pavana Sita Ram. So sometimes they may be chanted in Kirtan, but with the Mahamantra we have Krishna, we had Rama, we had Hare, so we have Radharani there. So we don't have to separately chant Radhe Radhe, because even when Krishna was Srila Prabhupada was in Vrindavan, when he was greeted with Radhe Radhe, Srila Prabhupada would respond with Hare Krishna. So that's why today we're talking about Srila Prabhupada, so we should try and follow that simplicity and standards so that newcomers, because I'm mainly in charge of newcomers with book distribution. So when you give a book to a person on the street and they come to a program, if we keep the program simple so that they can all feel part of it, I think that's where we can have more of that inclusivity. And there are some other mantras like Govinda Bolo Hari Gopala Bolo. And that doesn't come in Sampradaya as well. And that's something that was eye-opening to me, because I was like, well, I've heard of that mantra. What else? Anything else you can think of?
Govinda Jai Jai Gopala Jai Radha.
Yeah, Srila Prabhupada did chant that.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
That's the one maybe outline. Govinda Jaya Jaya Gopala Jaya Jaya Radha Ramana Hari. Yeah. Anything else? Any other folk bhajan you can think of?
Jai Jagannath, Jai Baladeva,
Yeah. Jaya Jagannath, Jaya Baladeva. Yeah, that's Subhadra. But you do that during Rath Yatra, and but if you do it during a Sunday feast kirtan and you don't have Jagannath deities or anything, like a newcomer will be very lost. So it's just by chanting Hare Krishna, you also honor Jagannath, Baldev, and Subhadra. So you have to think of it that way. But there were some mantras that that we should kind of refrain from because they don't really come in Sampradaya. So so that's basically what the kirtan standards that I was able to attend is. Make sure the tune and melody is not Bollywood tunes. That's another one. That's a big one, because sometimes instead of thinking of Krishna, we think about the Bollywood movie that's Amitabh Bachchan or some lover singing, So we should avoid. The Srila Prabhupada had simple tunes, so you can, in YouTube, it's very easily available. Srila Prabhupada had very simple tunes, and if you can follow those tunes and play the instruments accordingly, I think that would be more than sufficient in terms of coming in Sampradaya. So.
It's also not about being an expert musician, it's just about
So it's not about expert musician either. So it's not like you have to be a fantastic mridanga player, fantastic kartal player either. It's just stick to a certain simple standard where you have a simple beat for kartal, simple beat for mridanga, and that's enough. You don't have to be overly complex about it. So that's essentially it in terms of the presentation, because Srila Prabhupada wanted things simple. And he also stuck to tradition, at the same time he was very practical. So he just kind of married the both things. So that's why when people think of Srila Prabhupada, they may not know this, but he came to the West and he brought the Sampradaya with him. He didn't just bring, a mantra that you can chant and get enlightenment, but he brought the whole Sampradaya with him. And ISCKON, whether we see ISCKON Scarborough or ISCKON in New York or ISCKON in Amsterdam, ISCKON in London, these are all embassies where one can get connected to this sampradaya or tradition in disciplic succession. So that's a very rare thing. So please take advantage of the teachings, the practices, whatever we do, come accordingly in that way. And we have wisdom in the form of books, we have kirtan, we have prasadam. All these are part of Lord Chaitanya's practical ways of engaging oneself in bhakti yoga. So thank you everybody, Hare Krishna. And now we'll have some time for questions and answers, because question and answer is very important in our disciplic succession as well as in our tradition. We see Krishna and Arjuna. If you see on the front of the Bhagavad Gita, we have Krishna and Arjuna there. We have Sukdev Goswami, Parikshit for Bhagavatam, question and answer. So let's have question and answer. So any questions? Yes. Okay, good question. So Prabhupada was our founder Acharya, right? So before Prabhupada was Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj. So now what Srila Prabhupada did was he had 5,000 disciples. And out of those 5,000 disciples, he asked many of them to take responsibility of Guru, Shiksha Guru, Diksha Guru. So we are now in a multi-guru society. So we don't really have a prominent, so Srila Prabhupada is Acharya, and we have a lot of gurus. And many of them are serving around the world. And he never had a system of like a monastery, like a mutt. Okay, there's Srila Prabhupada and then there's a next successor. He never had that in his plan. So we serve in a multi-guru society, and there are various Shiksha and Diksha gurus in ISKCON, and they're all serving Srila Prabhupada's mission. So there's no one person who is prominent, because we don't follow the mutt system. We're following more of a multi-guru system. Yeah. Right. Any other questions? Yes.
About the Sankirtan, the things that you read right
Yeah.
now, isn't it good to keep this in each and every temple before each singer start to sing, so that way before it gets disturbed, the sampradaya, that we can preserve it?
Yeah, I think in terms of organizing kirtan,
Because during Janmashtami time, there are like 4-5 virada, even like some people were saying it's too loud, they were like, the
Yeah.
people are fasting and they're having headache and stuff like that. So it's.
Yeah, so Bhakti Maharaj mentioned that the volume of kirtan must, 85 decibels is where it's like gets very loud for the ear. It should be that we mostly hear the voices of the people who are chanting. So the Mahamantra should be taught, just like Govardhan Hill. We see Krishna lifting up Govardhan Hill with his left hand, and we may put some stick there, the villagers thinking that they can hold it up. But the Mridanga and Kartal is meant to support the kirtan, not that the Mridanga and Kartal overtake the kirtan, right? So we have the standards by Jayadvaita Maharaj. Bhakti Maharaj is going around. He went to Montreal and Brampton, doing these kirtan standards, where he talks about the volume of the kirtan, what type of tunes, what type of tempo you should have. And with Brampton, he mentioned that those who have taken the seminar will be allowed to lead kirtan. But otherwise, it used to be people will have 15 kartals, right? And they'll be just banging the kartal, and it doesn't become very sweet anymore, right? It becomes kind of like, if a newcomer comes, they'll feel like very like, especially a person who's kind of a neurodivergent, person, who may see various things and hear various things, and their senses kind of get overwhelmed. And instead of having like a nice melodious, kirtan, a nice experience, they kind of get overwhelmed. So we must try and be inclusive of them, yeah. So it's the best thing we can do is we should follow ourselves, right? I think with us being an example, then we can kind of share that example with others, because it's, many people may be set in the way they do kirtan, but I think if we ourselves are the change, then I think we'll be able to, just share that way of simplicity so that others can also be included. Yeah.
Is it okay to clap?
Yeah, it's okay to clap, and also when clap, you should also clap in rhythm, just like with the kartal. I can bang the kartal a certain way, or I can play it sweetly, right? So when you play the kartal, play it sweetly, and if you can clap according to the rhythm of the kirtan. Yeah, clapping is good. Yeah. Any other questions? On kirtan standards, or any mantras, or the verse itself, Bhagavad Gita 400. Yes.
So just like the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, we have the Gayatri mantra and the Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudeva,
Yeah.
Om Vishnu Namaha.
Yeah.
There's different type of mantras. Are we also able to use them as well, or during meditation and things like that?
So Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudeva comes in Bhagavatam, but when it comes to kirtan in a temple, we want to make sure that it's as inclusive as possible. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the incarnation of Lord Krishna in Kali Yuga, and he propagated this chanting of Hare Krishna. If you go to, say, the Krishna Balaram, anybody been to the Krishna Balaram temple here?
In Vrindavan?
In Vrindavan, yeah. Okay. So in Krishna Balaram temple, they have 24-hour kirtan. Yeah, 24-hour kirtan. And the 24-hour kirtan is only the Mahamantra. Because the Mahamantra includes Hare, Krishna and Rama, and we in the Gaudiya tradition, we worship the feminine aspect of divine, which is Srimati Radharani. So that's why we'll never worship Krishna alone. We always have Radha and Krishna, or Krishna's, expansions there. So we'll have, even if it's Sita, Ram, Lakshman, Hanuman, we have Sita there. So that's why when we chant mantras for kirtan, it's primarily the Hare Krishna mantra. We do have bhajans that are like that, Jaya Radha Madhava. That's why Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So we follow according to our disciplic succession. But in terms of folk songs or folk Krishna songs or something Brijvasi songs, we refrain from those because they don't come in Sampradaya. So we follow accordingly. So another one's what is it? Hey Krishna Govinda Hare Murare He Nata Narayana Vasudeva.
That's a pop.
it doesn't come in Sampradaya. So that's why we don't chant that in our temples. Yeah.
Okay, I have a question.
Yes.
So in that case, so I understand and I get it, and Srila Prabhupada and the Bonafide and this, I understand that, right? But is it an offense to the Vaishnava Sampradaya if you do sing it?
It's not it depends where you sing it. If you sing it in a temple,
Yeah.
that's, when you have the acharyas, like Srila Prabhupada's asana there and so forth, then it doesn't come in Sampradaya. Like if you go to Krishna Balaram temple, apart from the Mahamantra, they don't chant anything else, right? And Aindra Prabhu, who was the hero for many of those kirtanias in the Krishna Balaram temple, he was very strict on that, right? So I think it's important, yeah.
Just to add, it said that it doesn't add philosophical benefit.
Yeah, like it's,
Like it doesn't have that same
Bhav.
depth.
Right.
that bhav has to be there. Because when it comes in Sampradaya,
Yeah.
it connects you to Radharani and Krishna. And I think that connection is most,
Because I hear some of the kirtaniyas who sing, but they add in their own, like bhajans that will be
Bhajans.
sung
Probably they don't know.
other places,
Yeah.
but they add it in their kirtan.
Is that in temple?
Yes, like
Yeah.
even Golokanath Das Prabhu, if you know Golokanath. So I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
that's why I'm hearing.
I think Aindra Prabhu, everyone's
Yes,
that
yes.
considers Aindra Prabhu as a hero in our movement, he never deviated from that standard. We have Srila Prabhupada, who is an example. We have various gurus, Shiksha gurus, Diksha gurus who have propounded this standard, and we must stick to it, because if you're trying to fill things in, I'm just looking from a newcomer perspective. If I'm going to go out and distribute a book, and they're going to come and they're like, okay, and Hare Krishna mantra, okay, cool, that's nice, I can follow it. You have a nice tune, you have a nice melody that I can follow, because you can even make the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra so complicated that it's like a complicated tune, and it's like nobody can follow. So keep the tune simple, but if you change it to Jaya, Radha, Madhava, Radha, and then keep on going on the deity tour, to a newcomer, they feel very bewildered, and the effort of us going out and talking to people on the street, distributing prasadam, having a kirtan in the park, distributing a book, and then they come to the temple and it's like overly complicated, then it's like they don't feel like they can really be part of it. Like once I went to church, I went to like a Catholic church, and they had so many prayers, and I had to stand up, sit down, stand up, and sit down, and I didn't have a prayer sheet, and I was felt like I don't belong here.
I felt like that in the beginning too,
Yeah.
bowing down.
Bowing down, yeah. So we should try and make sure that you can bow down, but if you don't want to bow down, at least put your hands together and bow down like that. If you're not able to bow down, so let's all just be inclusive and also follow Sampradaya. So keep it Hare Krishna Mahamantra, and if he said Jaya Prabhupada at the end of our kirtans, we should know what Prabhupada actually said about kirtan standards. So it's really important that we follow that, and if we follow that, then we can preserve things. But if we try and change things and add a little bit of, masala and spice in terms of extra mantras, then it can get confusing. Yes.
Did Srila Prabhupada write like a book on songs?
So we have a Vaishnava song book. So they are available. She has one. So yeah.
So I guess it's only those songs. So
Yeah,
we can
only
always-
those songs.
Yeah,
And these songs are not just ordinary songs. They come from realized souls. Like Lochan Das Thakur, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Srila Prabhupada, they all have certain realizations about the Supreme Personality, Shri Radha and Krishna, and they write these songs, and we follow these songs. These songs, by chanting these kirtans or bhajans, we can attain to that, connection with the Sampradaya. And there's plenty of songs in that songbook. So it's very deep, profound realization. So this is one way of following Sampradaya, having a songbook and chanting from the songbook and reading the translation when you get a chance. If there's no questions, we can say Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. And we will have the darshan.